back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we're going to have regularly on the program, at least once or twice a month, John B. Wells, who has his own radio show called Caravan to Midnight. He was extremely popular over at Coast to Coast Radio, usually on the weekends, and he is now has a extremely popular worldwide show called Caravan to Midnight. Welcome back to the program, John. I don't think we have John B. Wells yet. We're working on it. So we'll just have to see what happens in a second when we get John tracked down. And of course, John B. Wells basically covers a whole range of topics. I like how he's very deliberate. He approaches things sort of like I do, which is process rather than events. I like to get people to change their paradigm rather than me trying to change their minds. And if we change the paradigm or perspective, they can change their minds if they want to. Or they can absorb as much. And I put in information not to filter it so that it's, quote, dumbed down, but I put it out in the full block of information, whether it's technical or simplistic or integrated with spiritual, geopolitical, financial, and other issues. This morning, actually, before we have John on the program, had really good luck with Michelle. We were talking to a number of people who have called and asked to get set up in our Carrot Bars program. Pete Feddick will be back in the first hour tomorrow to talk about our Carrot Bars. And I just want to kind of summarize, we try to provide here Nutrimedical solutions for spiritual issues, a perspective about who God is and who we are, a perspective on functional medicine, which we call living pathology, and the vast majority, 99.9% of doctors, nurses, and health professionals around the world are not undertrained, they're not trained at all on the actual function of what a living, healthy person is. Which is why I say repeatedly that only 20% of drugs are appropriate 20% of the time, and that number is shrinking. Once we approach the genetics, epigenetics, plasma physics, the biology of what a life force is and what a living person is, we change our perspective on what environmental toxins do to the body, what epigenetic signaling does from smart meters, what toxic arsenic and fluoride, which are still in the water here in California, what forced vaccinations are, how they're medical assault. So that's the kind of situation we have. So I guess we're having some trouble connecting up with our guest John B. Wells. So we'll just continue to try to track him down. I'll talk about the Carrot Bar program first in this first segment, and until we track John. What Carrot Bars is basically is a fractional gold system that encourages you to save in a currency that could be fractions of an ounce, 1 gram, 2 grams, or 5 grams, or larger. And then what you do is you sponsor other people to do the same thing. If you buy in at the bronze level, which works out to be about $113.33 right now, to get bronze, you build up what's called unilevel and multi-level. And it's not like an MLM, like a typical MLM, because you don't have to buy anything. Because you can register and not buy a thing, but you don't make any profit. You can buy gold. If you purchase a package, which is bronze, 113, gold, silver, gold, or VIP, you get increasing percentages of your downline, whether they buy gold or they literally sponsor other people. If you buy a bronze package, for example, in our network now, which we're building very fast, believe it or not, in a matter of days, we've had dozens of people want to join us immediately. So all the way from a bronze package to multiple VIP packages is what we have. They're going to do very well financially. They're going to not only save gold, they're going to actually have money put into their MasterCard. The typical person, and this is the mathematics, it's 2 to the power of 11. If you sponsor one person per month, and you just say buy 1 gram of gold per month on an auto buy, you will, if you sponsor one person per month and they do the same thing down each month, just one person, at the end of 1 year, you'll be making $18,000 per month. That's a lot. The average person, even if they made a tiny fraction of that, maybe 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, they're going to do very well financially. But also they're going to have gold to speak for it. So that's how the program works. We tell people there's other advantages happening to the Carrot Bars. By the end of the year, they will have Carrot Bar actual physical notes, which means like money, like the dollar, but it'll actually have gold in it. So it'll actually have a physical value, which is fractions of grams of gold. Then the second thing that we're going to have by the end of the year with Carrot Bars is that you will be able to have vendors around the world can sign up and actually transfer electronically fractional amounts of gold, much like a credit card, but it's much better because it can't be deflated. It can't be seized as a currency or deflated like the dollar because you can't print them infinitely. It has to have LBMA gold in the actual currency or the Carrot Bar cards. And, of course, something that I'm working on with Professor McCanney is a fully encrypted communication network and a fully encrypted electronic bartering currency, EBC I call it. And what that means is you could use the Carrot Bars as your standard, and using Carrot Bar grams or fractions of grams to have a standard of exchange of services and goods, and we can exclude services and goods we don't want, which is illegal drugs or prostitution or anything illegal. Otherwise, people can exchange these around the world. So the combination of fully encrypted money that can't be hacked, a gold-backed bartering system, which is like an electronic gold-backed electronic tally stick, and the idea of encryption allows you to have a currency that can replace money anywhere on the planet, and it won't be biometric money. It won't be biometric money like the coming mark system that, of course, the globalists want to enforce. But it also will allow full transfer of fractional gold currency to people around the world that can't be deflated. For example, a gram of gold in 1922 could buy 20 loaves of bread, and $1 could buy 20 loaves of bread. Right now, $1 will buy 1/3 of a loaf of bread, but 1 gram of gold will still buy 20 loaves of bread. So the actual buying power will be held in your money. So in other words, it encourages people to save. Anybody can save a minimum of 1 gram or $55 worth of gold as a gram every month. And if you encourage that behavior to the people downline, you'll be rewarded by not only improving their financial situation, but you're actually saving something physical that has value. You're exchanging a fractional reserve currency that's going to be devalued. There's 24 currencies worldwide that are in trouble, 13 more that are on their way to trouble. The dollar is the least of the pack in terms of trouble, but all of them will be affected. We're seeing packaging sizes reduced. We're seeing commodities, food supplies worldwide under great pressure because of climate change, and it's not global warming caused by too much CO2. So we have a situation where the world economy, the only way the globalists can fix their super debt problem is to bail in your money, which steal your bank accounts, which is why it's very good for you to transfer that out into gold and Carrot Bars so it can't be seized by the banks. And number two, you can build a network so you can actually have a business to encourage other people to do likewise, to start disconnecting from the fractional reserve currency economy. So eventually there'll be a giant network of providers. When we have it available, we will accept Carrot Bar fractional currency as payment for Nutrimeds or consults or other equipment, and it'll all be exchangeable worldwide, so it won't have borders or boundaries, whatever. So already Carrot Bars is in 124 countries and expanding very rapidly. In fact, I think we found at certain times of the day, especially on Fridays when they give out their commissions, it's so busy there. In Stuttgart, Germany, where their main computers are, it becomes a real problem to try to process things when it's midnight there, because that's when their computers kind of just start downloading and sending out commission checks, putting them electronically in people's MasterCard account. And the way you cycle is you build up points, and the points are built up not like any other multi-level, because this technically isn't, to infinity, so that, let's say you join the network now or in the next few months, we could potentially have many thousands of people that will be contributing to your account, even if you don't put much business in yourself. And by next year, you could be doing very well. So get involved with Nutrimeds and our Carrot Bar business, and we will help build it for you and with you to make you secure financially, not only physically, but also our Nutrimeds are the best in the world. Do not get nutraceuticals elsewhere. Only get ours, our silver, our Nutridyne, everything. Don't get second best, get the real stuff. Back in a moment. Back, and we did track down John B. Wells. Welcome to the program, John.
Glad to be with you, Dr. Bill. How are you?
Good, good. What I want to do is I want to ask you first questions on the kind of topics you're covering currently on your show, Caravan to Midnight. People should subscribe to your show, because I think you have a talent at bringing out from your guests information that changes people's paradigms. And you do it in a way that isn't, let's say, assaultive, but you do it in a way that is, how can I say it, transformative. How's that?
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, that was very kind of you to say that. Yeah, you know, for whatever reason, I feel sometimes like the professor. Wasn't that Christopher Lloyd that played him in Back to the Future? I finally invented something that works. That deal, but actually, I don't claim to have invented anything. I like to say I just suited up, got my spikes on, and went out on the field. But when people come on the program now, they virtually all of them already know about Caravan to Midnight, and they're comfortable coming on because, number one, they know I'm not going to ambush them, and number two, they know that I'm not going to argue with them, and number three, that they are at liberty to say whatever they feel like they need to say, whatever they think and feel that they need to say. It's a comfortable environment for them to do it in. And so I think once somebody told me one time when I was struggling with this electric guitar that had much heavier strings on it than it should have, the guy said, hey, if you want to play, take the chains off your body. You know, this thing is not set up to play any kind of rock and roll music. So that's the same thing. Once you take the chains off of them, then they're able to make some music, and it's been really rewarding. And people in 143 countries are responding to it in a way I never thought I'd see in my career. So I'm just delighted that it's all going the way it should.
Yeah, I think what I think it is that people are. Let's put it this way: think of the media as almost like a form of intellectual food. And if you went to vending machines, which are there are now six major media outlets that control not only the regular commercial media, but also scientific publications, what you realize is they're putting out, you go to the vending machine, or the people go to the vending machine of, say, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or the radio stations, ABC, FM, etc., and there's what's called, I call it a desert of boring information and non-transformative dialogue. And
that's funny. Bill, I call it the desert of vacuous content and opinion, and we try to make our way to the oasis of rational thought. So
right,
I think we're related in our attitudes.
So the Caravan basically is taking you for the Caravan. I like that because my great-great-grandfather actually was a Basha, and he actually owned a caravan that went from Damascus, Syria to China twice a year. So my great-great-grandmother was actually... her father owned a caravan, literally. So when I say caravan at midnight, they would caravan along the Silk Trail to China twice a year. And they didn't ride on the camels; they walked beside them because they carried cargo, right?
Right.
So people need to understand that the first thing that I've learned from this is that I can get real super high tech. I take a slightly different approach than you. The first thing is that I speak primarily to what I call the steel wool of civilization. And I don't necessarily tone it down, although there's parts of whatever I say are real simple, so it's all like a menu, like going to a buffet. And I do take the attitude that if a guest says something that are harmful to my audience, there'll be a dialogue that will be tense, let's put it that way. If they say something that's going to be putting the audience in I call it intellectual position of changer, because I think of people in the sense as I'm their big brother and I'm looking out for them, and I don't want them to be intellectually tainted with bad perspective, not necessarily knowledge, because we don't have all the answers, but what I want people to do is ask better questions. So my approach is a little bit different. You're more how can I say, comforting to people. I'm more, if you want to call it, challenging and out of the box completely. In fact, I'm a box agnostic. I'm a messianic, cosmic Christian, but, in many circles, if I gave my statement of faith, I'd probably be burned at the stake or strung up.
Well, different styles in approach makes for a really, really interesting band. And
exactly, It's almost like...
When I first spoke with you, I thought, man, I better get myself a couple of shots of Ginkgo biloba or something if I want to talk to him. Because,
well, I got it in my chamber.
Your technical dialogue is astounding. And yet, it's understandable. And that's why I like talking to you so much, because I really do.
Well, here's the thing that I'd like to open up today. And what I've realized is in this desert... And I'm trying to refine even my dialogue and content better and better by having people like yourself on to help improve me. And my wife, who's a very good communicator. What I've learned is I try to give people I think of the world almost like in the universe as like mathematical equations. And if they don't understand the 0 and 1 of reality, they're always going to be victims. And of course, you know, the old story is knowledge is power. The people that are in power try to keep everybody ignorant. They feed, you know, they treat us all like mushrooms. They keep us in the dark and feed us BS, right?
Bravo Sierra, yes.
Right, Bravo Sierra. So they do that so that we are constantly victims, whether it's financial systems, that's why we have our care parts, that's where the healthcare system. When I expose what's going on in the healthcare system and even the medical lawsuits, when we talk about things like Jade Helm, which I call terror porn, and a lot of time, what I want to do is not necessarily quote frighten the people. I want to change their perspective so that they will change their mind, because I can't change their mind; they have to. So, what topics are you dealing with lately that are kind of like tuned to the current pulse of what's going on in the nation and the world that you find really particularly important?
Well, you know, they're now becoming time-worn subjects, but it's money and power. And I'm just wondering, and the criminality of government. And we know that throughout history, one story after another about, the king was behind, his treasury was depleted, his gambling debts and his wars had just tapped that treasury out. He needed a new plan, so along came somebody that's a financial genius, and off we go down another path. So we know that whether it's a monarchy or supposedly a democracy, we know the people in power will manipulate things largely to their own ends because they are, regardless of how lofty a perch they may find themselves being seated in, they are still human beings and they are still fraught with human frailties and human predilections that the more power they have, the more intense these predilections become. And that's why we hear all this stuff about, I mean, seriously, somebody, any rock and roller that's ever been out there has run into an underage girl who looked much older than she actually is and even had the fake ID to go with it. But the fact is that technically under the law, this person is guilty of pedophilia. However, it's another thing when you learn that it has been running rampant, and these people didn't ask for ID. In fact, these people, whether it's the ministers of parliament or people in Congress, these people have absolutely run wild with this stuff in some cases, and yet they are a protected political class, and they are virtually untouchable. Even when it hits the press, they're still untouchable because the mechanism takes on a life of its own, and there's so much distraction, there's so much chaff, as they call it in the Air Force, when you're dropping tin foil to confuse the radar. I'm not sure how well that works now, but
keep that thought. We'll be right back with John. Welcome back. John, the biggest thing that I think is happening, and if I was to say anything, is that there is a global epiphany, a thirst for the knowledge of the nature of what we are as beings, the nature of the universe. And as people watch things over the last 25 years, like Star Trek or sci-fi, what they're doing is philosophically trying to discover where our place is in the universe. Like the Drake equation, which calculates out the probability of Earth-like planets and other life forms in our galaxy. In fact, if you actually take the Drake equation and the various research things with these special telescopes looking for signals in deep space, you calculate out that there's probably 100 billion Earth-like planets that support life in our galaxy alone. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. In other words, if you're a gambler and you went to Las Vegas and you were able to put 100 billion gambles on Keno, you're probably going to walk away a millionaire or billionaire or more. In other words, if you gamble that much, you're going to win. You have to win. It's statistically just the way it is, which means there's going to be life out there. And if there's life out there that's exceeded us, but even if you want to call it geopolitically, scientifically, 1,000 or 10,000 or a million years, it'll be so advanced it'll be a galactic civilization that'll transit across wormholes and interdimensional travel. And the mindscape of the nature of what we are on a three-dimensional level is going to be, far more advanced. So in other words, if you're looking out there for little green men to come down, no, you're not going to see that. But also people don't understand there's beings in the spirit realm that, of course, the ancients knew about. They called the jinn in ancient Middle East, or people call them demons or Nephilim or whatever. These things are not imaginary. That's why when you see, for example, I mentioned before the break about the dramatic thing that all high-level Masons are bisexual. People say, what? They all are. If you go, for example, to the crypt in Yale University, the ceremony that both John Kerry, who's our Secretary of State, and George W. Bush went through, because they went through the ceremony on the same day at the building called the crypt, is they would actually lie naked and talk about their sexual fantasies to the crowd while they did a sex magic ritual and swear an oath to the goddess Nu, which is the goddess of destruction, so that they would therefore live to their life to the fullest to this goddess of destruction during life. And they're all based on basically we call sex magic rituals and weird stuff. People say, well, why is that? Well, if you look at all of these organizations, the reason is that they're basically doing a ceremony to a higher dimensional realm. You know, if you want to talk about it in the Bible or in any ancient book, you realize that there's a spirit realm that's above our physical realm, and those beings are very intelligent. In other words, if you want to call them spiritual pathogens, if you want to call it, or spiritual beings. And what's going on, for example, all this discovery of pedophilia in Britain is because these people are, in a sense, people of clay and iron. They have the clay of physical flesh, but the iron of a spiritual entity that's inhabiting or avataring them. And that the high-level masonry basically has ruled Earth, no matter what country it is, whether it's China or Russia or whatever. Every country on Earth is ruled by Masonic orders that have people that are being avatared on a spiritual level or a mind level that transcends the physical flesh of the human body. Now, that might be very shocking to people. That's why, for example, high-level Roman Catholicism is all bisexual. Why do you think they have celibacy? High-level Masonry is. High-level Buddhism is. All these high-level organizations of any ilk, even communism, are bisexual. And the reason is because the demonic entities at the highest level order are called the incubi, which are a bisexual warrior demon that actually can inhabit the mind and that can control the mindscape of the people involved. That's why we have people like Obama, sexually assaulted by his physical father, Frank Marshall Davis in Hawaii, prepared by his what I call his family, who are all basically spooks in the CIA, because remember, all these high-level agencies, NSA, CIA, Jet Propulsion Labs, are all basically into Satanism of some form or another, and all Satanism is bisexual, period. People should understand that. That's why it's being pushed down our throat here in America and around the world, and people are finally realizing, like, how come this keeps on coming up everywhere? It's because there's a spiritual reality that people are not aware of, or they think doesn't exist because they've been told foolishness by either their pastor, their priest, their rabbi, their teacher, or whatever. They don't understand these things. And I think, yeah, interesting, eh?
Well, yes, it is. I'm wondering now, do you think some of these people that go through this ritual, for example, going back to the crypt, do you think that they do it because they want to be, inducted into this special society, and they don't really mean it, but they've taken the oath anyway, they've spoken it with their mouths, and so they're in anyway, whether they thought it was just kind of for fun or just kind of a kinky joke or whatever?
It doesn't matter to the powers that be. If you go through the ceremony, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Actions create, we call doorways. Just like taking the action of a drug like ayahuasca or peyote or LSD, or the newer ones like BZ, which is research back in Vietnam to try to disorient people in the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They're using BZ, which is a long-acting form of LSD they researched, and at various universities here in America, and of course DARPA. What people should understand is there's a spiritual dimension to all of these things, including the Fed Reserve, the U.S. government, the royals, down through the royal bloodlines and so on. They call the blue bloods. And if people don't understand the spiritual side of this, they're going to be like a bug hitting the glass, never knowing, why does JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs, have a lot of Satanists? Why do the Masons like Buzz Irwin go up to the moon and put a flag up there with his Masonic cloth over top of his spacesuit? Really? I mean, we're talking about putting his Masonic cloth on over his spacesuit and doing a ceremony on the moon. People say, you've got to be kidding. No, Doctor.
No,
that's not true.
No, you're not kidding.
Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm unveiling things. And for example, Have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Bill Schneblin? Bill, of course,
Yes.
Now, Bill is a friend of mine, and I ministered to him for a good part of a full day back in 1999. We were in Michigan, actually taping some television shows for the Prophecy Club and for a big Christian agency. And when he knew I had some knowledge in this, but he really didn't understand just how extensive it was. And people say, well, how can you know all this stuff? I say, well, there's various sources, and that could be a long story. But what I want people to know is they can test these things themselves on two levels. Firstly, they can check to see other sources to say, is there some backing for what he's saying on what I call a question level or an intellectual level? And then secondly, can they get aside quietly and just pray and say, is there a ring of truth to this? Why do I keep on seeing this pattern showing up and over and over again? For example, it's like going to Turkey and seeing certain patterns in the architecture and say, gee, there's a Turkish architectural pattern here. Why do I see this over and over again? For example, same with, for example, pattern of wars. You always have economic chaos, creation of massive amounts of debt. Then the banks decide that they're going to bring the two parties together to make a war to create even more debt, more power. I mean, the formula is there. That's why we're seeing ourselves being foisted forward toward a formula to create World War III. And if people don't see the process, they can't stop it because they think, well, if I just elect Rand Paul, or if I just do this thing or that thing, or if I just protest, and I call it cathartic activity, it doesn't fix things. It just means there's a catharsis so they don't have any emotional, anger or whatever, but then they actually haven't changed anything. What I want is actual, not only perspective change, but I want to see people change the nature of reality, because we are the authors of our own reality. So, making that statement, what topics would you think are the most burning that you've discussed recently on your show that people really want to know? What do they want to know about what's going on? You mentioned money. What issues on money and wealth?
Well, just that I spoke with Harry Dent yesterday and Joseph Meyer on Monday, and they're in similar. They're in the same basic groove, but with a couple of variations. But the thing that really kind of grabbed me about the talk with Harry Dent was that
we're going to break. We'll be right back.
We wanted to go ahead and fall down so we can go forward.
Yeah. Come back, and John, you were saying something very, very important. I think that people should kind of grasp it just before the break about the financial. A couple of people you interviewed recently on financial issues, because this gets at the heart. People are starting to understand what money is and what media is. In fact, at least a third of Americans, straight off, don't believe the government is telling them the truth about anything. A third, and that's an actual well-referenced poll. But what did these two experts tell you?
Well, Joe Meyer is just Joseph Meyer is he's the straightmoneyanalysis.com guy, and he puts out a very intense newsletter every quarter. And it's not a cheap newsletter, but it is very, very in depth. This is like the technical handbook for whatever is your favorite device, whether it's a motorcycle, your classic car, or whatever. This is real nuts and bolts. This is how the economy works. He also goes to court, and many times he can recover money that people have lost in shall we say, not completely straight stock deals where they wind up losing a lot of money. Right. And he's very measured in the things that he says. He's not an alarmist in any way, but at the end of the interview, you're going to know the conversation, I prefer to call it, you know that, and he puts it out there, and there's a certain amount of emotion in his voice when he does too, that this thing is not sustainable, and there's no mechanism out there that will cure it right now. So then you bring on Harry Dent, and Harry Dent is the one who was saying, when he came on yesterday, I said, well, Harry, I just noticed the gold prices are going lower and lower and lower, just like you said. And he started nodding, and that was it. It's just like let the reins loose and just let Harry run. And the thing is he said the only time we make progress is when we have some pain. The reason that we were triumphant in World War II, and for the next 25 years, we had just amazing prosperity, productivity, and a really happy, pretty well-fed and well-heeled society. And he goes, but the reason for that is because we got our backsides kicked so hard in the 30s, because what happens is, like it or not, the weak get shaken out, the entrepreneurs come forward, things change, and the society as a whole moves forward. So, you know, his speeches were very compelling. Of course, that's not something you want to hear if one would find themselves classified in the weak category. Because nobody wants to be weak and nobody wants to think that they're helpless, but the reality is that some people are at this stage of things. Do I believe that every person? I would say that virtually every person has the capacity to get entirely and 100% with what I would like to think of as the true program, the true meaning and purpose of human life. But they're not doing it because of many things, many distractions, spiritual distractions in some cases, social distractions, physical distractions.
You're referring to like the parable,
you know, it
Jesus
just seems
said.
like the whole program runs on chaos, and it can be controlled up to a certain point, but after that, chaos is chaos, and you're just going to have to wait till you get through it, if you get through it, to see what's next. It's just, well, it seems like what we want to do now is we want to get to the end of the book without bothering to actually read all of it, and it's just not possible.
The way I see it is very similar. I don't think we have to get to the end of chaos. I'll tell you what we need to do. People have to suffer a certain amount of pain before they're willing to go to the right doctor. I'll give you a good example. By the time they call me, and including, by the way, I get a lot of physicians around the world that have been in practice of them 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they contact me from all over the world trying to get themselves better, their family members, because they've reached the end of their own skill set of conventional approaches to their own problems. And the same way with your financial expert. The real problem is you don't get a Moses walking forward until you have the people in slavery and the Pharaoh's deciding he's no longer going to collaborate with the Hyksos people of Egypt, which are independent, you want to call soldiers, and had their own implements of warfare. They were starting to enslave them, and then even killing the firstborn, and so the people themselves were suffering under such a heavy boot that they finally said, hey, we need to accept a leader. People are not ready to accept new ideas and new leadership until they suffer a certain amount. And right now, the suffering of the population is reaching a crescendo. 24 currencies worldwide are creaking, 13 more are on the way. And what that means is basically the financial pain. The Baltic Dry Index is the lowest in 50 years. People are waiting for real leadership. And the leadership basically does two things. It provides them with a vision of what you can have if you change your perspective. And number one, it gives you a plan of what to do to step into that new perspective. I think that the solution to the problem is far simpler than what people want, because it's like anything. Give you an example, and I'll use a medical example. I had an interesting consult a few days ago by somebody that their dental surgeon, as a biological dentist, wanted to do very extensive surgery and bone grafting for someone who had some NICA, which is infection around their teeth. And I said, no, you don't need to do that. You can get lumen photon, take our supplements, and in a month or two go back to your dentist, re-x-ray, and I guarantee you'll be fine. You don't need $10,000 of surgery. Well, the same thing with our financial. I tell people when we set up our Carrot Bar program, we need to start disconnecting from the financial system. We need to start getting out of the big cities because if the power goes up, because the powers that be want chaos. Obama is a chaos master. Just look at everything he's done in the last 7 years. Look at how he even went to the United Nations to even see if they're going to approve our deal with Iran. Look at his deal with bringing in all these Muslims, 323,000 immigrated to America, and 127,000 Muslim students with visas here. Obama's a chaos master. He's a high-level Mason. He's bisexual. He fits the modus. He was brought in by Zbigniew Brzezinski from the Council on Foreign Relations. Everyone in a position of power in every country, pretty well, except with a few exceptions, like Mr. Vladimir Putin is a good example. And the head of China now, by the way, Xi Jinping, these are not people that are controlled. And the fact is, the powers that be that run the Western banks that started World War I and II, they have to be able to create chaos. So they want plagues spreading. They want economic chaos. They want the middle class fearful that their bank deposits are going to be bailed in. What I see happening is the solutions are frighteningly simple, but people aren't suffering necessarily enough pain yet to accept the leadership to tell them what they need to do to fix it. They don't want that. They'll often reject it, and there's a lot of false leaders out there telling them, whether they're politicians or financial experts or medical experts, telling them lies because they've turned everything into a business, including the business of politics, which isn't necessarily doing the right thing. I saw Carly Fiorina from the Republicans on Fox News last night, and this woman has some brains. She's saying, I want to change the paradigm here. She worked at one of the biggest corporations. She used to be a secretary and worked her way up. And the reason is, I can see this woman has vision. She has a vision that we don't need to do the same thing where politicians say they're going to control the border and make cities secure and get rid of the sanctuary cities, 120-some cities that allow illegals that are felons to walk around the streets and kill and harm more people, like this Cates law they want to put in. So what I see happening is people's pain levels getting to the level where they're ready to kick the surgeon in the face. They're ready to say, hey,
yes,
I don't have enough anesthetic here.
You're absolutely right. And it's interesting that you should bring that up, the pain level. Recently, I can't remember who spoke of this, but it was about people who could not feel pain, how they just, they kill themselves sometimes. I mean, they really, really mess themselves up because they can't feel anything. But look here. Here's Bloomberg Business with one. Drug companies exploiting rare mutations that make one person nearly immune to pain, another to broken bones. And, of course, the quote down here is that it's a gift from nature, and it is our obligation to turn it into something useful. That's Andreas Grauer, Global Development Lead for the osteoporosis drug Amgen, that drug company is creating. So here's the thing. What happens when you have a society that is so numbed, like the old Pink Floyd song, comfortably numb, with television and with literally with drugs? I would like to just mention Dr. Gregory A. Smith's American Addict 2 is out. Dr. Smith is a real MD who was one of the few who will say, no, these doctors have to go through the system and toe the line the whole way, or they won't graduate from medical school. They will not be doctors. But once you get free from the system and you have your credit, you have your title, then you can go off on the pathways that you want to, and of course instantly become a pariah. But what his whole deal is that there is so much dope out here. Who in the world ever heard of treating an infant aged 0 to 6 months with an antidepressant? And when you combine all of this stuff that's in the water, the stuff that's in the air, and we know damn well that those are not contrails up there. Some of them are, and many of them are not. And we know that they can contain nanoparticles of various metals, and no telling what else is in there.
To our next show, John.
Once you have anesthetized your...
Hey, Berkey Guy here. Are you still drinking